Yet another roundabout. Do we kick it off? We're recording.
Yep, we're
Good
on
evening and
now.
welcome. Welcome to the After Hours show. I'm Joe in Norway. I will not be your cook for this evening because I am on the road, and we'll get to polka dotted gooseberry almond tart tomorrow, late this evening maybe. But instead of that, we'll have Anne Lee speak to us about the happenings of the week in Ukraine, possibly a little bit about Israel Palestine. I believe you might have a rant as well, and you
Well, yes,
need to share your screen or cut mine, maybe.
yes, here
We
I
don't
am.
dox myself.
Here I am. Hello, everyone.
Good evening.
Hello, everybody. Yes, we're sort of flying by the proverbial seat of our pants today, but welcome to the After Hours show. Other things will be on tonight, like, for example, Twilight Zone in about an hour and 10 minutes, or no, in I can't tell the time. Hour and 10 minutes, yes.
Or
Uh, John, do you want to talk a little bit about that for a second? What's going to be on tonight?
Yes. Tonight we have an episode called The Long Morrow, and it stars Robert Lansing and Mariette Hartley. Oh, and also Edward Binns. Uh, so it's a good cast, and I think it's a good story.
Excellent. I recall Robert Lansing from 12 O'Clock High.
Yes.
All righty then. I'm not sure what else is on tonight other than The Prisoner. I think it's episode 11 now, tonight at 11 in 3+ hours. So that's kind of what I think is on deck for tonight. Let me ramble on a little bit as as some of us might watch. I'm not sure we should show the the sort of windshield survey a version of Joe getting home in Norway on single lane roads. I think he turned it off. He's here. He's listening to me. All righty. So tonight and today, busy day. A variety of things have happened. I'll talk about Ukraine in a moment, but let me just say that we're at the Harris for president shortlist. I think it's down to 5 or 6, depending on your particular point of view. Let's see. It's Waltz, Shapiro, Buttigieg, Bashir. I'm trying to do all this from memory. Who else? I can't remember. I think that's it, right? We have Bashir, Waltz, Buttigieg, Shapiro, Kelly. Whitmer has sort of fallen off the radar in terms of the shortlist. The shortlist is all male, but it's a vetting time. It's been described as she's going to be doing some sort of at least video meetings with each of the candidates. So she's doing like a standard job interview thing, interviewing all the candidates, and we'll see how how well they do or don't do. It appears as if Waltz, the governor of Minnesota, is actually a charming guy. I mean, if nothing else, he's got Christmas videos of his pets that are still on the internet, or at least on Twitter, and it's quite, it's just amusing. So that's there. The issues around Shapiro are actually kind of extreme in the sense that he's pretty much on one side of the Israel-Gaza issue and has probably made some, well, not so much extreme, but assertive comments, let's say, on the Israel-Gaza policy. So that's the other thing that's in the background. Also, that his one of his aides is I'm not sure whether it's Oppo or not. The one of his aides reached a settlement with someone for sexual harassment. So that's kind of a little background deal there. So there's some sort of glitches relative to Shapiro. I don't recall that there are any other controversial ones relative to all the folks, and the usual ideas apply at the beginning of the sort of process. Buttigieg actually polled the highest in various polling, not so much that high. He was pretty much tied with Shapiro at the front end, with Waltz sort of in third. And it depends which polling you're looking at, and this is not extreme level polling with a lot of detail and with trending elements in it. So that's kind of where we are. So there's no Whitmer, but you have a variety of other folks. They've sort of added Pritzker. The MSNBC graphic showed Pritzker. So that's another sort of background. Whether Pritzker is a real dark horse or fully engaged, it's not clear. He hasn't made a Sherman-like statement yet, so a General Sherman statement, that is, if chosen, I will not, whatever. I will not serve. But be a dark horse, let's just put it that way. I think there's actually the possibility of a dark horse, but it really depends on conversations, because it could be that they all cancel each other out for a variety of reasons. Speaking personally, I think Waltz is a good choice simply because he has no big negatives. Although I think the oppo on it would probably be to run all of the whatever he did, whatever statements he made during the George Floyd event. I think that those will probably be the ones, if you're doing oppo, that is, if you're a Trumpist, that's probably the ones that will come up. Other than that, it's been a busy day. Hello. I think I got this. It's not me. Did you hear what I said before? I was talking
Did we lose
about
you,
the
Ann?
big. I think so, and it's not my fault, or well, it is my fault technically, I suppose. Zoom is telling me my internet connection is unstable. Needless to say, there was a return of there was a return of hostages. I probably got cut off somewhere around when I was talking about a vice presidential shortlist, and so you haven't missed much. Let me just say briefly on that. I mentioned my preference, which would have been Waltz of the governor of Minnesota, and I just spent a few seconds yammering about how he probably is on the short list because he's not very controversial, but the George Floyd Black Lives Matter protests probably would be the thing that they would use oppo on in terms of Waltz. So I'll give you my preference. That is my current preference, although I do have dark horse sort of preferences as well. But I think in terms of winning the election, I think that this is the best choice of all. Second choice would be Bashir, but only for reasons of balance, I suppose, which for some people doesn't really matter. But I really, truly believe that in marginal cases, a vice presidential candidate from a southern state would actually have some marginal advantage. And I think that's very important. And I think Bashir also has his own. I wouldn't invent the negatives, but there are ways in which you could do oppo on that as well. So I'm hopeful that there's smart people smarter than I, looking at all of the polling data, et cetera. So beyond that, I did that kind of recaps the yammering that you may have missed. Anyway, hostages returned last night. A whole range of folks and a whole bunch of countries involved. Several NATO members. It was very complicated. The Germans were unhappy about releasing the same fellow that the Putin wanted back during the Brittany Griner exchanges. That there was a lot of discussion about that. Germans were uncooperative. They didn't want someone who was a pure assassin. He'd been sent in by the Russians to kill a Chechen, and it was basic wet work, and that's what he had gotten arrested for, and they were holding him forever. Germans didn't want to give him up. I think the spin on it is that Biden, because he has the kind of diplomatic gravitas or whatever, convinced Chancellor Schultz to let him go. And so this very large exchange of a multiplicity of people, other people down the list are sort of interesting as well. The Russians, of course, wanted to have people like this one fellow who's the assassin back, simply to ensure that other people who do that kind of work can be assured that the Russians are going to eventually get them back. But I'm sure the other options for Russians are always kind of interesting. Anyway, that's the state of that. The mainstream media spin on it, of course, is Biden's diplomacy. Vice President Harris was there at the meeting of I think it's a chartered jet that took off from Turkey. The transfers were made for this particular set of folks. The three Americans. The fourth person went to Germany because of ill health. It's the Russian dissident with a green card. So this is kind of what happened. It's pretty good. I think it was well orchestrated. The press, of course, everything was unscripted. Biden talked to the press in very clear tones about this, and of course the oppo on this was that Trump and Vance tried to hijack this by saying something, mainly incoherent elements. Trump had made a declaration on his personal web platform. He was the only one who could get, particularly the Wall Street Journal reporter back, that he was the only one who could do it, and that he had the inside track on Putin. Well, the conclusion, of course, is, and a lot of people are making this conclusion, people, on the left and on the right, that Putin kind of sees the writing on the wall, and this is punting. That is, Putin perhaps concede that Trump's going to lose, and he wanted to, sort of get this done, get this particular element of trying to get folks back to make a prisoner exchange and make it done. And I think what was interesting, of course, that and without discussing the details, there are a lot of details on this that have been described by all kinds of folks, Jake Sullivan, et cetera. And they've been working really tirelessly on it, and it really only came together not so long ago. In fact, I think the final step was taken just before Biden withdrew from the campaign. So you can see that there's not a lot of lead time on this, and many people were involved. The State Department working really heavily on this, and so you had Vice President Harris and President Biden at the airport on the tarmac at Joint Base Andrews. A very full press contingent there. all the usual kinds of things. And plane lands, people pop out. There's the kind of informality I think that you would see. It's a non-formal landing. Biden even took the time to go back up into the plane to talk to the pilots, and I assume there was probably on the plane some staffers from the State Department, a lot of folks who are involved in the kind of transfer in Turkey, and then the immediate flight from Turkey to DC. So taking advantage of all of these things. It's well timed, of course. It has campaign implications, and as I said, Trump was caught flat-footed on this, and he got nothing. He's been trying to make some sort of something, and it really shows. And in fact, they tried to bushwhack Biden in a East Room presser before this happened, before he went to the airport, et cetera, et cetera. Some a yelling press member tried to get him to comment on Trump's point of view, and Biden's little, the way he does it, he goes up to the microphone and says, then why didn't he do it during his term in office? And that was pretty much drop the mic moment for Trump. And needless to say, I think Trump reacted to that, because then you had the sort of J.D. Vance yammering and Trump yammering and throwing out all kinds of stuff, and only a couple of Republicans trying to support some sort of there's no there aren't any Trump points of view on this except to try and hijack it, and he really didn't do a very good job of that either. So that happened last night. As I say, really good live TV in the sense that it's fairly well orchestrated, good overview, decent backing up of facts, a decent post analysis, and of course today's lead is essentially the return of hostages. And these were folks being held for a couple of years, and this goes back to the Paul Whelan, who was part of the original Brittany Griner deal. They were trying to get Paul Whelan back, and Putin wanted the German hitman back, and that just fell through. So Brittany Griner was. I'm back again. Yeah, I was just part of the original deal, and so I'm back. Let me talk a little bit about Ukraine. It's been a busy week in Ukraine. The first at the beginning of the week, the F-16s are now in operation. They're mainly used for air defense. That is to say, they aren't doing any offensive work over the border into Russia. Although I would hope that the SBU, that is the intelligence services in Ukraine, are doing their due diligence to try and figure out a way they can get some F-16s over the border or something over the border to knock off a Tu-95 in flight. I think the second they do that, Russia's going to fold they're not going to fold completely, but they will have issues. Needless to say, a lot of drones have been sent against Ukraine. The Russians sent in 90 uncrewed aerial vehicles, drones. They're cheap drones, and most of them were shot down. I think they sent in 90. And the Ukrainians shot down 89. So good on them. There have been missiles every week. There still is ground combat. Combat still occurs. The Russians are taking little bitty portions of land, and it is no different than before. There's been no kind of major assault. The same things are happening. Conscripts are being used. It is a sort of artillery and drone battle of a sort. A variety of new pieces have been introduced. A new reconnaissance drone on one side, reconnaissance drone on the other. Some new kinds of activities occurred at the beginning of the week. There was I think, a long range. Maybe I mentioned it from last week. A long range drone attack on Murmansk, or the airfield close to Murmansk, where a Ukrainian drone damaged some bombers and Su-31s, I think. And so that was interesting. Interesting only because it's the longest at 1,800 kilometers, the longest incursion by a Ukrainian drone over Russian territory. So that's embarrassing, if nothing else. Other military activity has occurred of the usual variety. Stuff in all of along the fairly complete line of battle. There've not been attacks on the Russian air defense by the Ukrainians, so there's not been a lot of that. More important, I think, was the idea that the Ukrainians haven't made an official announcement that F-16s are being used, but one flew over, and I'm sure it was intentional. They flew over Lviv in the west a couple of days ago, and so you could see with your camera that, and they flew fairly low so that you could actually see that an F-16 was in the air. So that was sort of interesting. More F-16s have been transferred. They haven't caught to how many are being used. I assume they're being based fairly far away in the west of Ukraine. Based in them elsewhere is actually sort of interesting, but I think you'd have to sort of prove that's really happening. So that's been occurring. Another sort of dangerous stuff has been happening, although in the case of Israel Gaza, 2 assassinations this past week. Hamas, Hezbollah sort of related ones. There were assassinations using fairly precision bombing in one case. In another case, the poor devil went to a place where the explosive that blew him up, and he's a guy they've been trying to kill for 25 years. They blew him up with a explosive that had been planted in the room that he was staying 2 months ago. So bad on the the Iranian Republican Guard for not sweeping their doing security sweeps of their facilities. I mean, and the bomb supposedly, and this is both have been not claimed by Mossad, but there's plenty of indications that it was Mossad that does this. And this is not the first time that assassinations occur during some moment. And whether you want to interpret this as just simply an assassination operation, or whether it's meant by the Israeli government and prolong the war and jeopardize any discussion of ceasefires, you have to sort of decide where you're going to go with this. Whether there's been retaliation is unclear. That's sort of occurring, and sort of as a parallel development, another carrier group has been sent to a U.S. carrier group, the Teddy Roosevelt, as it were, and about 8 additional ships is being sent somewhere to the Eastern Mediterranean. So there's other issues at work here. It's sad to see this happening. The whole issues of ceasefires at all have still been problematic. In the post Bibi Netanyahu comes to the U.S. to talk to part of the Congress, and of course it had all the usual propaganda elements built into it. So that's been the week of happenings in that area. Other matters have occurred, mainly targeted explosions that have killed numerous people. And that's another issue that is going on. So it's been a difficult time, I think. The Russians are clamping down on internal security, trying to reinforce without reinforce their troops without having to go to another sort of mobilization. So that there's a lot of fuzzy things are going on that in the sort of background, clampdowns, of course, on internal dissent and a variety of other measures, and of course the usual Russian yammering about the U.S. elections, the favorability they've made towards J.D. Vance. I think they're trying to suggest to the American GOP that they might replace Trump. I'm not sure that that's exactly what they're trying to do, but the fact that they did a few props for J.D. Vance is sort of always sort of interesting, not necessarily done by central Moscow government, but by their propaganda arms, where they do various things about that. So that's kind of the other side of things that are going on. In other events and some racial violence that has occurred in the UK, riots in the north, in the northeast, mainly prompted by right-wing neo-Nazi thug types. They did manage to set fire to a police station, and a couple of cop cars are burnt. So there is a rioting. It's not clashes necessarily among races, thank God, but you could say that there is mayhem is occurring, and injuries have mainly been to police. So, for example, here we go. I'm back again. There is, as I said, racial violence occurring mainly in the northeast of England by neo-Nazi, right-wing, thuggish types, and so that's kind of part of the story that's going on. It's sad when I'm more stable than the internet connection, but here that's the way it goes, and here I am. It is the best of times. It is the worst of times. So aside from these brief interruptions, generally the world is probably as peaceful as it's ever going to get, but it is problematic. So many different things. On the armament front, that's one thing. More transfers of military weapons, Leopard tanks, and a variety of other things. Munitions. There's been no comments on munitions, so I assume that flowing forward, North Korea has been providing vehicles. They did that in their. It was included in their the last description of their transfer of artillery rounds to the Russians. Not that they're really good artillery rounds, this I think the rumors are, but they've also transferred a couple of missile launching anti-tank vehicles, six-wheeled vehicles, which sort of suggests that the Russians may be not necessarily they're going to buy a lot of North Korean vehicles, but there's at least a couple that have been transferred. They use a kind of anti-tank missile that is very similar to one used by the Russians. And so this could mean that the Russians are running a little short on anti-tank rounds. And I think in general that is an issue. Their hits on tanks have tended to be by drones of one kind or another. They have one particular drone that's actually fairly effective. I think it is because there's no jamming is difficult, and they do loiter. So that's another kind of issue that's going on in that particular case. There are, of course, vacation time has started in Europe, so there's a lot of that going on, and one hopes that there won't be any kind of violence or danger in some of those instances. Although in Spain and Mallorca, there's been a sort of anti-tourist demonstration. Not that tourists have been attacked. It's mainly demonstrations against the government by Mallorcans about the, just the glut, I assume, uh, of births. I assume it's relatively cheap, as it often is, to get to Mallorca. And it is one of the places that you sort of head off to if you live in the more northern Europe, and it's a very pleasant place to be on the one hand. On the other hand, not that it's unsafe, it's simply that there are protests going on. There have been minor protests in some other kinds of places, but relative to this tourist glut business. But I think part of it is I think the pressure from that there are regional recessions going on in a couple of countries. So that's kind of the way the economy is going. It's going to turn around. It will turn around after the vacation period. And, that is sort of the difference between that hemisphere and ours, although many people are taking their vacation now as well in August in the United States. Fortunately, the big crises seem to be in abeyance while the Democrats are approaching. And in fact, there's been a virtual voting going on, and we all knew that that Kamala was going to be the nominee. So that happened. So that's firmed up as of, I think, yesterday. And so everything is proceeding with the next sort of big decision making, and we'll see whether there are going to be leaks about the final decision. I'm not sure whether the final decision is going to take place until Monday, perhaps. The announcement is supposed to be made on Tuesday in Philadelphia at a kickoff to a campaign tour through swing states. So that's kind of what's coming up this coming week. There will be a number of those kinds of things. In about 40 minutes, we're going to have Twilight Zone. I hope you'll stick around for that. My internet connection, of course, has gone unstable yet again. So we'll see whether we can last at that. Needless to say, I hope that everything has been shared properly. That people will pay attention to the little yammering that is going on. In larger news, there is some suggestion that a recession is still on the table ahead. There may be some movement in that particular area soon. Nancy has something to ask or contribute. Nancy?
Yeah, I heard somewhere somebody speculating that this prisoner exchange could lead to an end to the hostilities in Ukraine. And I wondered if what you might think about that idea.
Well, it's unclear whether a ceasefire would have been a contingency built into the conversation. It could have been. We really don't know. I don't think so. I think what we're looking at, it's not going to end hostilities so much as it would bring the talks about a ceasefire closer. That's possible. That's certainly possible. Most of the U.S. Officials have not said anything on that kind of note. Let me just say that there's no official word about that. But if you're going to speculate about something, there could be some opening, considering that Turkey was part of this conversation. There's been a consistent, probably back channel conversation about ceasefires. Let's put it that way. The Ukrainians even softened their position on the potential of a ceasefire, but of course, their demands their demands have never changed. They're into a ceasefire if all the Russians will leave. It's pretty much what's missing in that particular context is a kind of the UN or some other, the Security Council starting to weigh in on that. John?
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to
Thank
comment
you.
on the. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I want to comment on the recession comment. If there is a recession, we should call it the Jerome Powell recession, because
Indeed.
he's deliberately, it seems, trying to harm the Democratic candidate. And I think he's succeeding. I mean, I've been saying for almost a year that, Biden should be pressuring Powell publicly to reduce interest rates,
Yes.
like Trump did when he was
Mm,
in office, and Powell
indeed.
responded by lowering interest rates. This fiction that the Federal Reserve is somehow non-political, that it is independent of politics, is absurd. What they do is always with a keen eye on politics. So, um, yeah, I think it's irresponsible for Biden not to be pressuring him, especially now that he's not even the candidate. He's got a free hand.
It would be good for him to at least make a comment on it, because the Financial Times in England is the one who made this kind of opinion about the recession still possible. Uh, uh, the Treasury Secretary, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, in her appearance in Congress, actually talked about the potential for lowering interest rates. She was asked about it, but this was before Biden withdrew from the race. So it's not that people aren't sort of jawboning the lowering of interest rates, but Powell is sort of probably needs to be poked a little bit more. I think this is it's clearly about spin. Interest rates should be lowered. It seems pretty fair to assume, but I think it's a timing issue. I would assert that it's a timing issue. If one was in charge of the Fed, you make your there are problematic elements of that. For example, the unemployment rate went up a little bit. It was a couple of days ago, and this is, so from a timing point of view, you sort of want to try and time things so that they're less problematic. Let's just put it that way. But you've got all these little things. It is about timing. There has been a discussion about Kamala cleaning out the cabinet. So,
Well, the other problem, of
comment.
course, is that the way you should deal with inflation is to raise taxes, especially when you have $1 trillion deficit,
Oh yes,
and also
but
to address the concentration of capitalism, right?
Yep.
The trust and the mergers and et cetera, and the manipulation of the market by having a few firms controlling a particular market.
Except that we're in an election year, John. You're not going to talk about raising taxes. I mean, the fact is, in the platform, it's the $400,000 yearly income or above, and I think that the Democratic talking points should be emphasized. But discussions of taxes are really a problematic issue in the last. We're now 95 days before the election.
I would not. I would not have raised the issue now, but I would have a year ago.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, and to
it's
emphasize,
been a platform issue about the
right, and to emphasize that it would only be on people making over $400,000 a year.
Yeah, of course, and in fact, I have never seen an ad campaign that integrates that. I mean, I think there are clever ways of doing it, and my usual disappointment with how the Democratic Party does its communications. Well, that's a legend. But I'm noting that I'm not sure whether he wants to talk yet or not, but Joe has returned to the main studio, so it will be interesting to see.
I
See
have
whether-
indeed. We just arrived. I have to apologize. This is as far as I got on this evening. Gooseberry polka dotted almond tart thingy experimental cake I was going to try out, but sadly my birding fetish got in the way, and we went from we hiked 8 kilometers more than expected, and I can barely walk. I can
And no
barely get
puffins.
off.
You didn't see any puffins,
No
man.
puffins. Damn it. We did see 2 eagles embrace. That was incredible. Truly incredible.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And then there were gannets or
Gannets
or whatever they're called.
and many of vermicious canids. A lot of gnats out there. Just stinging the whole time. It was quite annoying, but it was beautiful out on Runda, this bird sanctuary on Western Norway, Norwegian coast.
Was a
So,
was a beautiful sunset.
was
Regardless,
lovely.
needless to say.
Indeed. So I'll be doing this sometime tomorrow because we are desperately low on cake in the house. So
Yes, never one can never have enough cake. Similar to pie. Uh,
with liberal amounts of creme anglaise to help it go down. Vitamin custard,
Indeed.
as I call it.
Indeed. All righty. Well, we're at the top of the hour, 8 o'clock. Should we sign off until Twilight Zone in 30 minutes, or do you want to keep this on?
I don't think I have the energy to do any baking. I'm going to pass out. So maybe we should call it quits unless you covered everything.
Yes, I covered everything. I yammered and then ran out of space because my little brain is not completely awake, but that's another story. So unless there are further questions, we'll try and do a lot better next week. And we don't even have an outro thing, and I'm not going to hum it. So we're going to be off for half an hour until we do Twilight Zone. You can join us on Twilight Zone. You can get to that via our Discord. So you should come and join us. There's certainly ways of doing that. Listen, and thanks for another week, and we'll see you all next week.
Take care.
Thanks, Anne.
You got to cut the feed, Dan. There we go.